Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, I've got a rare one to share with you guys. You might not have even heard of this rare Norland-era model, and I don't blame ya. It's not necessarily written down in the history textbooks as often as other models, such as the 2550th anniversary or the Les Paul Artist or Artisan. But this is actually one of the earlier dealer-exclusive models. Now, you'll see a lot of sources call this particular one the first, but it's not. But we'll talk about that here in a minute. First, we gotta get it out and learn what it is. And unfortunately, the seller of this one that I found on Reverb one night, he didn't have the original case, but at least we have some sort of a case, right? But this is actually a Canadian exclusive limited edition. So it is a dealer custom ordered guitar from the years 1978 through 1980. Let's go ahead and take a look at this thing. After we get all this stuff off of it, I'm keeping the suspense up on this. So our headstock looks like this. La Tosca Exclusive by Guy Brassart. Okay, so this is one of the earliest double cut reissue guitars that we've seen in the Norland era. Now, there were a few other ones. It's not the first. We'll dive into that a little bit here more in a minute after we've taken a look at this thing. So we've got a flame maple top with P90 pickups, sustain sisters in the body. We'll talk about that on the workbench. TP6 tailpiece, regular speed knobs with a 3-way toggle switch. All right. It appears to be an ebony fretboard that's bound with a mother of pearl Gibson logo, special truss rod cover, and check that out, a brass nut. Yes, that is stock. With kind of a cool 3-piece neck on this one, a little bit of flame figuring, and what appears to be a 1-piece mahogany body. But the biggest thing that makes this different from, like, say, what this is based off of, a 50s Les Paul Special, is the fact that we have binding and the maple top. So, very savvy guys might go, hey, that's a Gibson Spirit. But no, it's not. This is before the Spirit. So let's do a little bit of Gibson history so we can understand this thing. Okay, so in 1959 through early 1962, there were the DC Les Paul Specials. They generally had a cherry color, but they weren't super fancy. They were meant to be student models. Now, later on, professionals picked them up and ended up loving them. But those little goofy things from that 2 to 3 year period influenced so many manufacturers. So when you see this body shape, a lot of guys think Hamer. Because Hamer had a model called the Sunburst. That was introduced at the 1977 Summer NAMM show in Chicago. So you can find so many different colors of Hamers that look very similar to this. So a lot of people might be like, all right, so Gibson is copying Hamer with this model. That may or may not be true. Let's dive a little bit further. This guitar was a dealer exclusive for the shop La Tosca, and the owner is Guy Brassart. Now, his name is French, so you don't pronounce it the way it looks. Otherwise, it'd be Guy Brassant. Not quite as cool as Guy Brassart. Okay, so remember I said the 77 NAMM show, and then the first batch of these coming out in 78? So here's what I'm hypothesizing. It's possible that he went to the NAMM show, saw Hamer's new model, and went, hey, Gibson, can you make me one of those like that? Because what he did for this run is for 3 years, again, 78 through 80, he had to make 50 of these custom just for his store to sell up in Canada. And they were all marked on the back, kind of like a 2550. You see that additional serial number right there? This one happens to be 040, so the 40th one of the 1980 batch. So this is actually one of the last ones made of the La Tosca Exclusive. So it is possible that this is an influence off of Hamer's influence of the original DC Specials. Because if you remember correctly, PRS was also influenced on the DC Les Paul Special and has evolved into like the custom 22, 24s, etc. that they create yet today. However, you also have to remember that in 1977, the DC Special reissue was a limited edition that Gibson just did by themselves. It wasn't a dealer exclusive. So depending on when the serial numbers come out of that, that could potentially predate that. So maybe Guy just saw these and was like, hey, I like that new reissue you're doing. However, can I get one with a bound flame maple top, kind of like a Les Paul standard? So Gibson said, sure. That's another theory. Outside of that limited edition release, Gibson really didn't do too many double cut shapes. Like, this is the very beginning. Now, you can argue that the DC Melody makers were kind of a precursor to bringing back the double cuts. And I would agree, those DC Melody Makers are very high quality guitars from the 70s. They are not standard Melody Maker specs. In my opinion, they feel more like Les Paul standards in quality. But the next step is actually the Gibson Spirit model. And a lot of people will see these and be like, hey, those look very similar. The Spirit actually started as an Epiphone model, and then when that kind of failed, they ended up rebranding them Gibson. And occasionally, you can actually find rebranded Epiphones, like you'll see the Epiphone decal underneath the Gibson one. I really want to document one of those one day. So, in many ways, the La Tosca Exclusive was a precursor to the Spirit model, because I'm not going to lie to you, the specs are very similar, but you have to remember this thing came first. So Gibson kind of took their idea and mass produced it in a different way. So what makes this one better is, the bridge tailpiece setup. Those other ones were wrap tails all into one. Now, some guys like those. They were pretty nice high quality units. You can check them out in my review and demo. But these guys also have P90 pickups instead of the humbuckers. Those Spirits, you could find them in 1 and 2 pickup setups. Some of them didn't have the bound flame maple top, other ones did. Some of them even had Explorer headstocks if you got it from the XPL series. You can just check out my whole Spirit review and demo if you want to learn more about that. But other differences include, these big 70s attributes, like we were talking about earlier, the brass nut, the sustain sisters in the body. I mean, there were a lot of guitars using P90s in that era. Like, you had the Pro Deluxe, and earlier in the 70s, there was an SG Pro as well that had P90 pickups. But the 70s was all about them mini humbuckers. So if you're looking for a P90 equipped Gibson from the 70s, you don't have a lot of options. So these things were always just kind of a mystery on guitar forums until Guy or somebody from his shop kind of cleared up some misinformation that was spread online about these things, like just being fancy Spirits or whatnot. No, just custom ordered guitars. There's roughly 150 of them out there. And ever since that happened, I've always wanted to document one of these. I think it's a cool collector's piece of kind of obscure Gibson history. And the pricing, it doesn't really make sense. I could see these things skyrocketing in value once people kind of understand them a little bit better. Because being one of 150 and kind of a collector's model at this point in time, it just seems to make sense to me. But at the end of the day, it is still just a kind of a double cut special that's been fancied up a little bit here. So first impressions, yes, this feels very familiar to a Gibson Spirit. It's almost identical because we have the matching finish right here. Now, you can find some of them that are not just in this tobacco sunburst. I've seen cherry sunburst examples and one in wine red. I'm not sure if that was a fluke. And I'm not sure if there's other colors out there, because just search up La Tosca Exclusive Gibson and you're going to run into the same issue I run into. You only see photos of just a handful of these things, so they're still relatively unknown. So that's why I thought this thing needed to be documented. So to learn more about the Guy La Tosca Exclusive guitar here, let's go ahead, throw it on the workbench, and take an individual look at its parts and specs. Inside Guy's creation, let's take a look. Not many models in the 70s came with the P90 pickups, but you can always tell 70s P90s because they've got the cool clear bobbins to them. So the early 70s ones, I think they actually get a green colored wiring, which is really cool, but the later 70s ones just have the copper color windings. So if nothing else, I hope you learned about P90s in the 70s today. It's very common for these things to crack, so it's very nice that this example appears to all be intact. But anyways, inside our pickup cavity here, looks like you have a couple of routing holes in here. I'm not sure if that has something to do with the P90 pickups or what, but you can see the tenon of the neck joins into the body right here. Remember, this is a maple neck joining into the mahogany body. And I was really curious how thick this top would be. But looking in here, to me, it looks like it's so thin that is just a tiny paper thin veneer. I'm not actually seeing a physical top because that's all mahogany right there. The same thing is true in this area. And the neck portion of the cavity really doesn't have any type of finish over top of it, so you would be able to see it clear as day right there. So paper thin veneer confirmed on these guys. So it's not quite the same as the CMTs that came out in the 80s on the various models like Explorers, Flying Vs, or even the Spirit for that matter. But it is a real wood veneer, so it is a beautiful guitar. The figuring moves, it's not just photo flame or anything like that. This is actually a pretty nice little top here. Here's what that bridge pickup cavity looks like. Same 3 holes. No special markings or anything, but again, you can see this. But before we move on here, here's what the backside of the pickups look like. They just have a little brass plate, and they were installed using these little foam pads. So these foam pads were sticky. However, inside the pickup cavities, this isn't what it normally looks like. You see these 2 screw holes? That's the base plate that gets mounted into there. So it's kind of just like a modern day one, except for it feels a little bit heftier and robust. Oh, it all makes sense now why they have those 4 holes. It's because those protrude out, and that keeps the base plate steady for when they drill it into there. So remember those holes I was confused about? Mystery solved. The other thing I noticed, the screws that they use to secure the base plates are a lot larger than the modern day ones too. But now let's grab our pickup readings. Bridge pickup 8.08, that's pretty hot. Neck pickup, whoa, 8.5-ish. And then our middle position here, about 4. Moving on to our control layouts here, it's just regular stuff. It just looks a little bit goofy because of this body shape. So bridge volume and tone, neck volume and tone, with a 3-way toggle switch right here. The bridge is just the regular Nashville style. It says made in Germany right there. And in case you were confused what I was talking about earlier, sustain sisters. Normally a Nashville style bridge looks like this in the body. It just has a small stud. Think of the sustain sister as a giant stud that has a brass insert. Brass was a big thing in the late 70s and 80s. Some guys still swear by it, giving you the best sustain possible. So they started just putting brass everywhere on these guitars, for the high-end guitars anyways. So you'll see that on like the 25th, 50th anniversary Les Pauls and some other higher-end guitars in the late 70s and 80s. But hey, now you know what they're called. Here's that TP6 tailpiece. Essentially, you put the ball end of the string right here, and then this part moves up and down, and that's what this fine tuner controls. So you can tune it down here, even though it's not like a locking Floyd Rose system, but if you wanted to do some fine tuning, you can. Personally, for me, I never used the fine tuning aspect of it. I just think they look cool, and it gives the guitar a different feel. Just a little bit. If anything else, it makes string changes easier. You know that viral hit of B.B. King changing out his string so easily on stage? It's because he had one of these puppies on there. But the TP6 was a Rendell Wall creation and one of the few parts that Gibson actually made themselves. You can see this one's made in USA, whereas everything else hardware-wise was made in Germany by Schaller. The few of these that have shown up, they've been pretty beat up. This one, all things considered, it's in pretty good shape. I would say the worst thing cosmetically is, you got a couple of light nicks and dings. This one is definitely the worst. It broke through the finish, but the right guy could touch that up pretty convincingly, I would guess. But you've got some scratches. It was used, but not abused. It polished up pretty nicely here. You've got the really cool aging to the speed knobs, all original parts on this guy. Maybe not the perfect collector's example because of that ding, but there's only 150 approximately of these things out here, so beggars can't be choosers on this one. But this is a mahogany body with the maple veneer. So now I want to fill you in on the rest of the story here. So I was teasing you guys earlier that this was not the first dealer exclusive guitar. What came before this? Well, you could think about like the strings and things Les Pauls. Those are some of the most valuable Norland era guitars because they represent, the reissues come into play. It's the very earliest of the prehistoric eras. And you can fight about when the first one was. I believe it was around 1978, so it's very similar to this. However, with what I know, there's one that way predates these guys. It's the SG250. That was a Sam Ash exclusive. And that was early 70s. So is this the first dealer exclusive guitar? No. There was definitely some before, and there's been ones lost to time. Like, for example, the 25th anniversary Les Paul Custom. Check out this video. That was a Guitar Center exclusive limited edition, and that was done in at least 1977. But at the end of the day, it was a very early dealer exclusive run, because the 70s kind of birthed the whole idea that a dealer could get their own custom guitar just for their store. And nowadays, that's just commonplace. Sweetwater has their exclusive colors, AMS, Zounds, all those guys. So that's why I love the 70s era. It just birthed everything cool. Like, the specs were so crazy on everything. You always have to make sure you take a good hard long look at these models because there's some things that people have missed for many a years. Like, check out the spin-a-split knobs on like the GK55 video. But anyways, moving on from the body, we've got a maple neck on this guy, which is kind of a cool spec. And then top that off with a straight up ebony fretboard with mother of pearl dot inlays. For some reason, in the late 70s, whenever you did happen to get a P90 pickup guitar, they always put ebony on it. It's just interesting. Another example of this would be the Les Paul Pro Deluxe. They got the ebony fretboard P90 pickups instead of mini Hummers. But the frets are typical of the era, low, wide. You've got 22 of them on this. And I'm trying to figure out if this ebony fretboard is figured or if that's just remnants of my cleaning job. I can't tell. I tried cleaning it off, but it still does that like flame figured movement. It's strange. As far as our radius, it looks like the standard 12-inch. We have a 1.7-inch nut width that increases to 2.05 by the 12 with a first fret neck depth of 0.81 and 0.88 by the 12. So a very familiar neck on this one, kind of 60s slim. Here's the neck at the first fret and the 12th fret. Just your standard C-shaped neck profile. It definitely gets pretty wide by the 12th. Like it's a little bit skinnier up here, but then it gets very wide up here. So very typical of the era, I would say. And hey, speaking of brass, if you ever have a really old brass nut that doesn't look good anymore, just take some steel wool. Joop, 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 and it looks brand new again. That looks nice. This one has the truss rod cover that reads La Tosca Exclusive Brassart. If he would not have put this special truss rod cover on it, nobody would have ever have known what these things were, or the story behind them, or how many was made. So hey, Guy, thank you, I guess if you're still with us. But it is important to note, this is not a Les Paul, so calling it a DC Les Paul, no, because they don't have the Les Paul model silkscreen on here. So it's just a double cut special, I guess you could say. But you do have the sweet Gibson Mother of Pearl logo. You can see the lacquer's kind of chipping a little bit along there. That's very common. And you've got scratches and whatnot, but I just polished it up. But that is the big 70s style headstock. They were just using on everything at this time. Looks kind of goofy on the standards and other models, but looks fantastic on customs. Now that we've got it all strung back up, now I can tell you why these things feel different. The TP6 is a pretty bulky bridge as compared to what you normally have, so even if you deck it down all the way, it will never put the same amount of pressure on your bridge. So it kind of feels like a top-wrapped Les Paul, just because of how little pressure there is down here. Now, obviously, this one has some room to go down if you wanted it to, but I think that's the reason why I always think these guitars feel different. But hey, let's go ahead and flip over to the back side of this instrument to see what's going on back here. Only one cavity to talk about, and it is this one. Kind of a strange enlonged cavity right here. You can see what the back plate looks like right there. But you have an L-style switch, kind of like what you would find in an SG, and just the regular pots of the era. That one dates to 1980, and we'll take a quick look at these other ones too. It looks to me like this one dates to late 1979, and then these ones are 80. That's common to find. Normally, these two will match, those two will match, if it's not all four of them. Like my Spotlight Specials that I like a lot, you can find 1980 and 1983 in those. But we'll just take a second to appreciate the back here. It appears to be one-piece mahogany. That's what I've been seeing on most of these that have surfaced. But back in the day, that wasn't necessarily a special spec. Most bodies were one piece back then. Now the tops, that's where things got dicey, but they must have had some good mahogany back then. And these guitars are generally pretty heavy. So this one, it's got some scratches, nicks and dings, some buckle worming. It's not perfect. It's not, but I'm happy with it. At first I was a little but then after I polished it up, it started to look a lot cleaner than it did. So down here on the edge, it definitely has some scuffs. It was used, but not abused. Output jack is on the side, strap button here, and yeah. Right there. It's kind of like the Q series guitars. They put them there. Normally, it would be up here or back here, but that's where they put them. But now our neck. 3 pieces maple, Gorgeous figuring on this one, like a lot of wide movement on this, and it's got that really dark smoky finish. There's some light impressions on this neck, but nothing too crazy. And once again, giant volute, because we're in the late 70s and this is a Kalamazoo made guitar. Those ones are always giant, which I kind of find funny because the Kalamazoo guys are the original ones, so you'd think they would have done the smaller volutes because it's not 50 spec'd, but no, those guys were loud and proud towards the end. But you've got our Gibson branded Schaller tuners on here. Once again, our serial number dating this to 1980, 273rd day of the year. And looks like 16th in production. Nice. But that's just all the necks that were stamped that particular day. Within the La Tosca run, it's the 40th one made in 1980. And that tells us that it was made in Kalamazoo, as well as this being $4.99 or less, the last 3 digits. And this headstock definitely has some wear along the edges here. Now under blacklight, let's see if there's any touch-ups or anything. You can kind of see some of those nicks and dings a little bit clearer like this. Some light sweat absorption in this area, but our knobs are glowing the way I would expect to see. There you can kind of see some more nicks and dings, especially in this area. Right there you can see that finish area I was talking about where it has a small chip. But I would say the body is actually looking pretty good. Moving up to the headstock, yep, things are looking good here. And you can see that chipped area I was talking about a little bit more clearly as well. Even the truss rod cover is glowing a little bit on this one. Also the poker chip. Like the pickup covers always seem to glow a different way, as do the knobs. So everything's looking all right. As far as the back here, maybe a little bit of a stand rash that you can really only see under blacklight. I would say for the most part, yeah, this is looking pretty clean. And in case you don't know what we're doing here, the ultraviolet light of the blacklight makes the finish glow. So if you see something that doesn't glow, that means there's been a touch-up at some point in time. But thankfully, this one has no surprises. Doing international returns is never fun. All said and done, it weighs just under 9 pounds, 8 pounds, 14.2 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Yeah, so I hope that kind of gives you an idea of how it sounds clean. It's kind of like that 54 Les Paul we talked about not too long ago. The bridge pickup, it's got power, don't get me wrong. But nowhere near as much as that neck pickup. Like it almost wants to overdrive my amp, that's kind of cool. about you guys, but I am really impressed with the clean tones on this thing. Like, it really just came to life. I mean, there haven't had too many 70s P90 pickups, but the neck feels very familiar to me, but yet it's a lot lighter in weight than most of the Norland era style Les Pauls. I mean, technically it's not a Les Paul, but still a double cut Gibson. So yeah, I'm liking it. This is a good guitar. Let's try it with some distortion now. That bridge P90 really comes to life. Neck pickup's pretty good for lead. And that middle's kind of just somewhere in between. I couldn't really place it for distortion. Now that we know all about the La Tosca double cut, what are my final thoughts on this thing? One of the best guitars that I've demoed in a long time. Like, you guys can always tell when I like a guitar because it'll coax different things out of me that I've never played before. This thing has such a beautiful clean tone to it. These pickups really work well together as a pair. They have a very unique middle position. It's kind of funky, which I do like. And it's got that whole, hey, I'm a rare Gibson guitar phenomenon going on. I mean, I've had the Spirits before, and they're good guitars, right? But not as much as this. Like, there's just a little bit more special going on here because of that ebony fretboard that's also bound. Maple neck, like, it just feels so familiar to what I've played before, but yet so different with these P90 pickups, because I've done the Pro Deluxe before. I haven't done a video on it, but I've played them, and the pickups in that one didn't quite sound as good as this. So it's a combination of being able to get P90 pickups in the 70s, and it's not too heavy, because some of these 70s era guitars can get pretty chunky. So if you find one of these things in the wild, I would highly suggest trying it out. It's not like any other guitar that I've had in a long time. And I'm not really the biggest fan of the double cut shape, but you know, as I've documented almost every single one now, I've started to grow on them. The strap button placement really isn't that crazy once I got it on there. Like, sometimes the extended horns, that can get a little bit awkward, but it just wraps around here and tries to prevent neck dive. I mean, it's still a little bit wanting to go like right here instead of just resting wherever you want it, but I thought it was quite comfortable to play. The neck is nice and slim up here, but beefs up just a little bit up here for your solo work. So, if nothing else, I hope you enjoyed learning about this obscure Gibson model from 1980. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with a friend who you think would enjoy it, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. As always, if you're interested in being the next owner of one of these demo guitars, you can check them out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. There's some links in the description.